when you see that there are more homeless people now, when you see that there are deaths that are happening, and all they can talk about is how they've put a task force in place and allocated money, I asked a very specific question.
But basically it's been told, March 2026, if you haven't done anything, you lose the funding.
Down to the fire station, I see how it just looks like iced tea. It's disgusting, guys. It's disgusting.
Welcome to This Week Uncut, where we take a look at the week's top stories from CHCO-TV and The Courier. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth.
We have a bit of a special episode for you this episode, which is our final episode of the year. We're going to take a look at those big stories that really impacted Charlotte County this year.
2025 was quite a year, not just internationally, but also right here at home. So I'm excited to break down the stories. I have a feeling there are even more than we can get to today because it was a very, very busy and dense year.
Yeah, I mean, I struggled sort of to kind of understand, which ones I wanted to pick. And there was a few times when I was writing the story for The Courier where I thought, maybe this is better than this one. And so there was a lot of news that happened this year. And I think it was difficult to pick just five.
And I think, too, as we go into 2026, we're looking ahead to municipal elections in May. These will be the type of shows that if people are considering running for council, what a great way to give you a little briefer on everything that happened this year. And when we get into 2026, one thing that Nathalie and I are really excited about is we'll be launching a series on what it takes to run for council, what's the process, and really demystifying the whole process from becoming a candidate to sitting at the table.
That's right. It's very important to have a robust understanding of the commitment. And I've talked about this on CBC's political panel about, so many municipalities, up to 4 municipalities have lost quorum because people have either resigned or have left their position to run for a different office. And so it has resulted in the province becoming their supervisor. So that local decision-making power that community originally have no longer exists. Someone is making that decision from Fredericton. So this has been a challenging year for municipalities. I think we're starting to see some of the fruit and some of the impact from amalgamation.
And that's one thing that's really been a big takeaway from the show is how many people are really responding to an hour-long news show about municipal politics in Southwest New Brunswick, events from our area as well. So going into 2026 and really kicking off the year with the idea that these municipal elections are around the corner is going to be a super fun way for us to start This Week Uncut in 2026. But I'm getting way ahead of ourselves right now because we're going to look back at 2025. Where do you want to start off? Are we starting off at the top with the number one story, or
yes.
is there an order that we should go by? Okay,
I'm going to start with the top story of the year because I actually think that no one is going to be surprised by the choice that I have made, and that is the deadline relating to the St. Andrew's Market Wharf and Market Square. This was a huge piece of information that really allowed the council to reevaluate what they wanted to do after the pushback had happened in the community. So this was significant.
So what went into weighing the decision that this is number one? I can tell you from my own experience, even just being up in Fredericton this weekend, last week, when you were able to run into more of our colleagues, I get asked about the wharf the most, probably. Is there anything new about the wharf? So yeah, I'm not surprised this is number one.
Yeah, I mean, this was a really difficult thing because we kept sort of hearing that the clock was running out. Even I had wrote stories where there was some suggestion that this deadline was coming in March of 2026. So kind of like this impending sense of doom. And for a lot of the councillors around the table, we heard them express, we don't want to lose this money because we can't afford to do this if we don't have this money.
And so explain for people if it might be jumping into this. I have a feeling most people do know, but we're talking money from the federal government, from the province.
Yeah, so the way that it works is the province signed an integrated bilateral agreement with the federal government. And so the federal government provides them through different streams of funding, money for resiliency projects. And this happened to be through the green stream, which would include some sort of mitigation for climate change. And so that's why this project fit within that scope, because they want to protect not only the wharf from climate change, but they want to also protect the shoreline and protect Market Square, which is particularly vulnerable to flooding. We know that it's going to raise by a meter by 2050. So this agreement was signed, and then what happens is that money gets sent to the Regional Development Corporation, which is the governing, the sort of like the department that handles that money. That money is then redistributed to the proponent. So sometimes that could be, a municipality, it could be a university, it could be, some other sort of organization that the government would want to support. And there are many of these projects spread out throughout the province. The wharf is not the only one that, by the way, has been significantly delayed due to cost overages, changes in scope of the project, all of these things. So it's not alone in that. But we were under the impression that money would go away in March of 2026. So I decided to just go and make a few phone calls and see whether or not this deadline could, the original intention was to see whether or not the government could maybe extend that deadline or whether they would be willing to have a conversation with the municipality about moving that money forward. But
for clarity with that deadline, that means it had to be started by 2026, not finished or finished altogether.
Well, the way that it was worded was that they sort of had to, if they hadn't spent any of the money by that point, that they were kind of dead in the water. Not that it had to be finished, but that they had to have spent some of that money and initiated some of the projects by that time, or it was going to go away. Yeah. So I went to the federal government, and then I went to the provincial government, and I said, listen, what are the deadlines here? Could they be extended? And much to my surprise, and I think a lot of people's surprise, we found out that the federal deadline is that the project should be substantially completed by 2033, and that the provincial deadline was not March 2026, but March 2027.
Wow. Okay. So now having this back, a refresher of all that we went through this past summer and well into fall, what do you make of that? And what will that take us when we look at this going into the new year? Obviously, this wharf it's going to have something the new council that's elected in 2026 is going to have to deal with, because as we've seen, it is still in quite rough shape. We can't have certain vehicles go down due to weight restrictions. We had a boat fire recently that luckily the fire department was able to get down and deal with the fire, but definitely the wharf still needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, this story is not over. And certainly we will be revisiting several things in the new year. We have a right to information that will be is expected to come back to us in January. We have obtained information that perhaps there were some members of staff and council that actually were aware that deadline existed all the way back to 2023. So the story is not over. The other component to this is the council has spent $99,000 getting an engineering assessment of that wharf, which hadn't been done since 2018. So hopefully in the new year, we will sort of have an understanding of exactly what the damage is, what the structural integrity is, and sort of where it is on the scale of, does this need to be fixed urgently?
Mm-hmm. And nevertheless, with the plans that were in place, the town went to tender. Prices were well over the cost anyway than was what originally they hoped it would be.
Yeah, almost more than $2 million over what funding they did have, and that
would be the lowest bid,
right? And so in combination with the tender all coming in over what they thought it would be. I mean, the biggest, I think the largest one, was like 17 million. And so that would be, the largest type of project, and certainly that in combination with the deadline not actually being 2026 is what swung the council away from the particular design that they had chosen and the particular plans that they had chosen.
Yeah, and since that plan was very Market Square focused, is there any insight right now into what perhaps could be a plan that would come in within that budget, something that maybe didn't have the amount of extension to Market Square?
Yeah, I think, we have learned that there was always sort of plans for Market Square. We were able to reach out to the original engineering and architectural firm who did large scale renderings of what Market Square could look like, and we do know that there were certain people involved in those conversations, but not necessarily was that information then acted on or delivered to the public. We have that presentation available to us. So certainly, the project moving forward has to meet the scope of that climate change requirement, especially if they want this money the way that it has been presented. It doesn't mean they can't improve Market Square, and it doesn't mean that they can't improve the wharf itself. What it means is that it has to meet that criteria. But what this extra time provides the council and the community is time to find additional funding that doesn't need those requirements, that is more related to perhaps enhancing tourism or enhancing the experience of people who visit this town. So it provides them another opportunity to go back to the drawing board and take a breath and sort of reevaluate what they want to do. The other thing is that the municipal plan now includes that any large-scale public infrastructure must, or I think the word is shall, so shall and must are two different things when it comes to legislation. So they shall include a landscape architect or an architect in any large-scale public infrastructure, which was not part of this original plan.
Okay, and we did hear feedback from the public that was a concern for such a large-scale centerpiece project for a historic town.
Take a listen to some of our reporting on the Market Wharf and Market Square expansion project.
New information surrounding the deadline for completion of the Market Square and Market Wharf refurbishment project in St. Andrews has come to light. For more on this, here is CHCO's Nathalie Sturgeon.
The provincial and federal governments have contradicted a public deadline shared by the town of St. Andrews on Market Wharf refurbishment and Market Square expansion. In June, town staff told the council the money needed to be spent and the project moving ahead.
And we can continue doing the project if it's in place and moving forward past the March 2026 deadline, because we're showing we're finishing the project at that point. But basically, it's been told March 2026. If you haven't done anything, you lose the funding.
This deadline was the reason cited by multiple councillors for moving forward with their decision on the hybrid infill design that has been the subject of controversy. The reason was included in the motion to move to tender.
With the urgency for a mid-October start, a decision needs to be made tonight to proceed or not. Otherwise, we risk the further risk on losing a portion of the 2026 tourist season, as well as significant risks to the funding made available by the two higher levels of government.
One is cost. We do have money from the in form of a provincial federal government grant that is significant.
We all know that we're running out of time in this funding, and I know there's a conversation, we'll just reapply, you might get it again. But we've missed now, if we delay this project, two deadlines. In the second time, as I said, we spent $400,000 of engineering that the other levels of government have to pay. If you go back to the drawing board and you wasted tax dollars, there's lots of other communities asking for this money. I don't know about you, but I don't gamble with $5.4 million.
The funding is through Housing, Infrastructure and Communities Canada. It is redistributed to the province through an integrated bilateral agreement. In New Brunswick, those funds are then administered through the Regional Development Corporation to the town of St. Andrews, which outlines the project's deadline is to be substantially completed by October 31st, 2033. CHCO-TV reached out to HICC on September 3rd, and in a statement, it said, "We can confirm that Housing, Infrastructure and Communities Canada has not imposed any deadline on the projects in St. Andrews, other than the 2033 dates mentioned in the bilateral agreement." Again, CHCO-TV reached out to the Regional Development Corporation on September 4th, who confirmed that the deadline was not March 2026, but March 2027. It confirmed that that deadline could also be extended, provided they gave a justifiable reason. It said the town wouldn't lose that money if they have filed an extension application. No one from the town of St. Andrews responded to our request for comment by deadline. However, in a staff-led meeting on September 8th, Spear told the council he'd spoken with the president of the RDC. The town does not stream or record these meetings, and no minutes were taken, but the meeting is open to the public. Spear told the council there is some extra time, potentially, but it doesn't change the underlying facts. He reiterated some points already expressed, including the possibility of losing the wharf due to current structural deficits and the goal of avoiding impacting the summer tourism season. He argued the council could not look at the deadline in isolation, urging them to move forward, adding if the project stalls for some reason, another engineering assessment would be needed to look at its structural integrity. Although it's unclear whether any engineering assessments have taken place after 2018 that could put urgency on the project, part of the wharf approach remains under a weight restriction. The project is part of a pool of money, which means several communities have vied for the same funds, but it remains unclear where that March 2026 deadline originated from. Tenders are expected to come to the town on September 10th, and council could vote on those tenders September 15th.
A highly anticipated decision from St. Andrews Council regarding the future of the Market Square and Market Wharf drew a large crowd on Monday night. For more on the council's decision and what it means for the town's most iconic landmark, here's CHCO's Nathalie Sturgeon.
The council for the town of St. Andrews has voted against a low bid tender for the Market Wharf and Market Square project. Its original cost was estimated to be around $7.9 million, but all bids came in over tender. The highest was more than $17 million and the lowest more than $9 million. A hybrid infill design was the option being considered by the council, but in recent months had faced significant public pushback. While the project had support as well, the council was faced with the challenge of deciding how to move forward, balancing the public's feedback and repairing the town's most iconic landmark.
To believe that a contractor can plan and mobilize for a contract of this size in 30 days is overly optimistic. I doubt if any of these companies have the equipment ready to start fully mobilizing in the next few weeks. I voted to go to tender, fully expecting the results we got. But it was the only way to bring it to a head. But now I can vote no, knowing deep inside that I'm doing the right thing, no questions, no indecision of any type.
In early September, CHCO-TV reached out to the other two levels of government, seeking clarity on a deadline looming over the council, which indicated the funding would expire in March 2026. The federal department confirmed it imposed no deadline on the council apart from October 2033, outlined in the bilateral agreement, and only that it had to be substantially completed by that time. The province's Regional Development Corporation also confirmed the March 2026 deadline was incorrect, saying it was actually March 2027, and if the town provided a justifiable reason, it could extend, and that it would not lose the money.
If there was no chance to pump the brakes on this project, I would wholeheartedly support awarding the tender at this time. However, given the information that the deadline for the federal funding is not a hard deadline, I think we can hold off on awarding the tender and revisit some of the design phase. Revisit some of the design phase based on the significant public pushback.
No structural assessment has been done on the wharf since at least 2018.
We were going to do the visioning exercise for what the wharf would look, the wharf and the town square would look like after the project was done, when we should have started with the visioning exercise. In the meantime, so that was a bit of a mistake, but in the meantime, if the wharf falls into the sea, please know that I did everything I could to quickly and efficiently rebuild the approach to the wharf with a new structure rather than trying to patchwork something we really can't afford to do in the first place.
Acting Mayor Kate Akagi said the council always knew if the project came in over budget, it likely wouldn't move forward in its current form.
The big thing was we knew once we sent the tender out that if it was over budget, we weren't going to do it. We would have to reconfigure, which is what we're going to do. We're not letting the wharf go. As I said tonight, it's an asset for the town, for the municipality of St. Andrews, so we need it.
She said the next step is to provide a structural assessment of the wharf to determine how it is used until the project can find that balance. that was some of our extensive reporting on Market Wharf and Market Square rehabilitation project. I will say, you know, we talked to people who were in favor of this design and of this project, and we talked to people who weren't. And I think that may have gotten lost in the emotions related to this project. And I think for many reasons, this community wants to protect the wharf the way it exists now. And Market Square the way it exists now. And there is opportunity for change. Change doesn't mean making things extremely different. It just means adjusting the project scope or adjusting people's expectations. But any decision making that happens around that chamber cannot be done without transparent, accessible information. And so that is the next step for this council.
Well, again, we will be dealing with this issue in 2026 as well, so I'm not surprised that it made top of your list for looking back today at 2025, because this is one of these issues. Again, it will go into the new year.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, you know, there are still a lot of questions that need to be answered. And if I had a nickel for every question I didn't get answered throughout my career, I would not be doing journalism anymore. But certainly we will be endeavoring to find those answers. We will be closely examining the documentation provided to us in the new year, and the reporting will follow.
And then time will still be ticking on what is the 2033 deadline and the 2027. So decisions will still have to be made to progress with this project, but it'll be interesting to watch where it goes.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to move on now to our second most significant story for Charlotte County in 2025, and that was the Lighthouse Lodge, the homeless shelter in St. Stephen.
Yes, obviously, again, this is an issue that we will continue to follow into 2026 as well. We've been a part of, we actually moderated together a really standing room only by the end panel on homelessness in the community, as well as the shelter in St. Stephen. This was a couple months ago. Time has flown by, but definitely an issue that St. Stephen is grappling with.
I mean, it's going to continue into the new year because there is, you know, the council is undertaking a wellness task force to not only deal with the shelter, but sort of bring wellness to the community as a whole, which would include a sense of safety for residents. But we were approached by a few members of the community to have their side of the story told and sort of express the experiences they're having living in proximity to that shelter. And they expressed seeing, incredible instances of violence against people in the shelter or visiting the shelter. They say that they have witnessed what they believe to be alleged drug deals or people doing drugs on the property. This is a wet shelter, which for those who don't know just means that you don't have to be sober or clean at that moment to go into the shelter. But they have been clear, I think, in other stories that drug use on the property is not allowed. And they do have mechanisms to bar people from coming back to the shelter if they've broken the rules. But the issue with that is that they end up back out in the community with nowhere to go. So this has been a really tough subject for St. Stephen. The task force that's been established, the ministerial task force that's been established at the provincial level, has now an advisory committee which would have people, around the table to advise them on decisions they should be making. They have given, $7.5 million for transitional housing. To my knowledge, no projects in smaller municipalities have been announced, but certainly we're going to see some more of that type of funding sort of funnel its way down. Transitional housing is not permanent housing. It's housing that helps people get themselves inside a structure that is safe for them. They get the help that they need, and then they are equipped with the resources and the skills to then transition to permanent, stable housing. And
it will be interesting to see if St. Stephen gets that transitional housing going into 2026, if we hear any more news, because definitely I think most of us can remember even 10 years ago, not seeing this level of homelessness in our community. Is quite shocking to see it in Charlotte County, but as you said, it's other small communities as well. This isn't unique to us.
No, and this was something that did dominate a bit of question period in the last several weeks, because the government was accused of moving too quickly on a transitional housing project in Fredericton, and then a few weeks later, the PC interim leader Glenn Savoie stood up in the House and said, you're not moving quick enough because someone in St. John died, and so it's sort of a bit of a paradox. Either they're moving too fast or they're not moving fast enough. So there's a bit of flipping back and forth. We did try to get more information about the circumstances under which that particular person died, but there's not much that they could say for privacy reasons. But I think what they're failing to recognize is that people are dying on the street every day. This is not just one person that's died. People are dying every day. If you go into food banks, if you go into operators, if you go to shelters, if you talk to people, they'll tell you they are losing people every day. And it's something that we have to continue reporting on, and it's something that we will continue to report on, and it's something that we will continue to pressure government to provide answers for.
Because the answers, again, even the answers aren't simple. It's an ecosystem, whereas maybe you can get the transitional housing, but if you don't have the room in detoxes, if there isn't recovery help for people facing struggles with addiction or mental health, one piece needs the other.
Exactly. We're going to let you take a listen to our interviews with PC Interim Leader Glenn Savoie and Housing Minister David Hickey. Can you elaborate on what you learned about the death in St. John in regards to the homeless person?
Well, there's nothing that I can elaborate on for confidentiality reasons, but it's the concerning thing is that we are now in the cold season. We've had a government that's been in place for a year. They'll tell anybody who will listen how wonderfully they're doing. The facts state otherwise. So when you see that there are more homeless people now, when you see that there are deaths that are happening, and all they can talk about is how they've put a task force in place and allocated money, I asked a very specific question. How St. John is asking for money to be able to help relocate people. How much have you spent? And there was no answer. So the only thing I can infer is that it was $0. So it's one thing to make an announcement and to make all kinds of splash. It's quite another to act on it and actually have results.
I know you want to respect privacy, but maybe provide us some details. Like you mentioned a person had died. Can you tell us when and what the circumstances were or what area of the city?
Yeah, well, it was in St. John. It was within the last 2 weeks. Do you remember when I said that public health nurses were under threat of losing their jobs? Well, I was right about that too. So, believe me, when I say that there is somebody that has passed away, it is a tragic thing. As legislators, we should all be acting towards the best interests of people who are struggling, especially at this time of year. And so to have a government that talks about acting but is not acting, that's why I brought it to the floor of the legislature, to highlight it, to make sure that we're keeping them to account for what they say they're doing, but we're just not seeing the results.
Have you heard anything from on the ground groups that are working with the unhoused about whether or not they're seeing some sort of result from the task force or the whole government?
These folks work hard every single day. So the efforts that they make, they're the ones that are making the difference, really. So you'll talk to some and they'll say they're seeing a difference. You'll talk to others and they'll say that they're not. And of course, they have to be very, very careful because they're reliant on government funding. So any criticisms in this sector where dollars are hard to come by, you have to be very, very careful. What we need to focus on here is that we have a government that has spent a year, they've done nothing. There is money that they say they've allocated. Where are the transitional housing units so that people can get in out of the cold?
Didn't you criticize them for moving too fast on the Forest Hill transitional housing, though?
What I said was that they didn't collaborate or they didn't communicate, they didn't talk to the residents the way that they said they were going to. They weren't transparent.
But their answer was they had to move quickly, when you're asking them to move quickly now.
Well, if they want to move quickly, it's not that hard to get out into the neighborhood and start letting, believe me, they're good on Facebook with everything they do. It's splashed all over Facebook. It's on every social media post that they do. You can't get away from it. It's like an advertisement. So all they need to do is they just needed to advertise to people, here's what we're thinking of doing. We're going to have a community information session. People would have showed up. So no, I'm not buying that they needed to move that quick without informing people. No.
You can confirm then that it was an unhoused person that has died in the last 2 weeks. Were they from your riding or was it in your riding?
I'm not aware that it was in my riding. Part of the issue is, and this is something that's been ongoing, and I wanted to ask those questions today, but I ran out of time. The Office of the Coroner, right across the country, there is an issue with coroners' offices being able to allocate the resources for data keeping for people who are homeless. So we struggle here in New Brunswick to know exactly how many homeless people have died, at least from the coroner's office level. So I think that that's something that, like I said, I wanted to ask today, and maybe I'll get a chance tomorrow to ask the government how they're doing on that, because that was work that was started. I just don't know where it's at now.
I won't get into specifics on those, but know that each one obviously has had a significant and profound impact on community.
So it's two deaths. Are they connected, or are they two separate?
No, two separate situations. We think we're in a spot that is going to allow us to support those that need it from an out of the cold perspective. But it's important that we come back to shelters are not the answer for every community in the province, and we need to make sure that we are building in a way that reflects the need in community, and ultimately make sure that there are transition beds and capacity in community to actually house people properly, and to make sure that they're getting the support so we can end the cycle of shelter use and homelessness that continues year after year after year and is leaving way too many people in community behind. We need to make sure that we are building the actual capacity in the housing continuum to get people out of shelters into transitional and bridge housing, and ultimately into more stability in their housing. Sure, and there's plenty of nuance and dynamics in community, and we need to make sure that we are building options to make sure that not only is there capacity, but that there are different places for people with unique needs. We know that those challenges are unique amongst every person living on the street. We've got to make sure that we're nuanced enough and ready to be able to adjust to that.
It's been 7 or 8 weeks since you announced the task force and that $7.4 million. I'm wondering what part of that money has been allocated yet, and are there announcements coming on that transitional housing?
Yeah, I won't get into specific announcements, but we do hope to have a few more out the door in the coming weeks. Of course, we announced Forest Hills, and that's part of that funding. We want to make sure that we can continue to get more of that out the door in community, so that we're able to support people in the next couple of months.
Do you have any commitment to rural areas? I know Fredericton's an urban area, but rural areas?
Yeah, look, we see the need all over the province. In particular, in rural communities, what we're seeing is there isn't the depth in nonprofit supports, and there isn't the depth in outreach. And what we need to make sure is that that's being supported in the right way. So it often takes more in rural communities, but we're committed to doing that because we're seeing places like St. Stephen, places like the Miramichi, places like Bathurst that have not traditionally had to deal with these challenges in community at the level they are. We're making sure that they get the support they need, especially when they don't have necessarily the outreach and social supports that a lot of other urban areas do have.
So, I mean, how are you going to make sure that rural communities like St. Stephen and Miramichi aren't overlooked in the process?
Well, we're going to support projects that get more built there.
That was PC Interim Leader Glenn Savoie and Minister responsible for housing, David Hickey, speaking with the Press Gallery.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be looking again at our top stories of the year.
30 years ago, July of '95, I had an infant, and I was trying to prepare his formula and sterilize his bottles, and all I got was brown scum on top of the boiling water.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon. we are going to go to Black's Harbor, and I don't know that I said this before, anyone's going to be surprised by the topic.
No.
Water quality in Black's and Beaver Harbor.
Yeah, I was at the December council meeting for Eastern Charlotte, and again, this factors heavy into conversation when you're either at the council table or in question period with the public. Not question period, sorry, comment period. It still comes up at the end, and I know that they decided to just hold the rate of water at what it is, just because the quality is what it is, and we haven't seen that much improvement in a matter of years too.
Yeah, this really came to a head in the summer when, after an Englobe presentation, where Councillor Adam Hatt, made a list of things that he wanted both Englobe and the council to initiate. But what we heard from was resident after resident after resident saying this is unacceptable. Becky McNally, who owns the only restaurant in Black's Harbor, said during a boil water order she lost $20,000 in sales. So this is an issue that didn't begin this year. It has been ongoing. We even heard from someone who said, 30 years ago, I had to boil the water for my baby bottles. So this has been ongoing for a long time. For context, that water supply is actually owned, and the infrastructure is actually owned by Connors Brothers, a fish packing and processing plant that is a major economic driver in Black's Harbor. And the municipality is working towards either taking that supply over or establishing a new one.
Mm-hmm. And I think people, to keep in mind, we all know what the cost of living is and how much even grocery prices have gone up. So if you can imagine being a resident and feeling like you have to buy bottled water. If you want to, I know I've heard from mothers of newborn babies who don't feel safe washing their babies in the water as well. So it's been a very complicated issue that has a real life impact on people who are expressing their concern about struggles to get by and what this added cost means to them when they can't trust the water in their own taps.
Yeah, this is, there is legal complexities here. Englobe needs permission from private property owners if they need access to that property to drill a well or a test well somewhere on that property. So they have to go through the processes by the book in order to accomplish that. The MLA for Fundy the Isles, St. John Lorneville, actually spoke in the legislature to remind the provincial government of its responsibility to provide clean drinking water to all of the constituents and residents of New Brunswick. So this is a topic that sort of just keeps going. We did get a presentation recently from Englobe, I believe in November, that shed some light on what they think is happening in those pipes. I'm not going to say too much because we have a story coming out in a couple of next week, I believe, that talks about kind of sort of their plan. But they think that the levels of manganese and iron are a bit above what they should be, and they're coming into contact with chlorine in that first reservoir, and so it triggers this chemical reaction, and it's leaving deposits along the bottom of these pipes and infrastructure. And so they've developed, a plan to deal with that. So it's going to be short-term relief. It's not the solution to the problem, but it is short-term relief. And again, they've held the water rates so that people aren't paying more money for something that they shouldn't really be paying money for anyway.
I don't think anyone will forget our Aidan Rayner, who was here in the summer, bringing the water here to this exact table on This Week Uncut. Same bottles of water that Councillor Adam Hatt, representing the ward of Black's Harbor, brought to the council meeting just so people can see what it looks like. And he asked them to try to drink it. Adam Hatt did. The council, would you drink that? And nobody said yes. So, sometimes that's what you need, is that visual showing of what exactly they've been asked to deal with so that you can understand just how unfair this seems. And on top of that, the amount of time that's gone by with very little movement.
Yeah, I spoke to John Craig about this issue, and he says it's the number one priority of the council. And he believes that next year they will spend a lot of time focusing on how they move this project forward and how they sort of reach the stage where they can start asking the province for money. Englobe is currently working on pricing what it would cost to replace the transmission line, which they know needs to be replaced. So once they have some of those pieces, they can start going to the province and saying, we need this money for this project. And so the province is going to want all the information. They're going to want the costing estimates. They're going to want the plan for them in order to deliver that money to them. They're not just going to hand the municipality money. So that's the next step in this project as well, is costing some of these things and then giving them to the province so that they can help fund the council's efforts.
I said this at the December meeting to people afterwards. There were people, again, December, speaking out about water. A young person who is home from university and happens to be from Blacks Harbour came to council just to express her concerns about coming home coming home for the holidays, and this is what the water's like. But I did mention, if you have concerns you want to express, you can always reach news@chco.tv. So that's the word news@chco.tv, and send us your letters to the editor for the Courier. We fact check them. That's how to make sure that they're publishable. But other than that, if they pass the fact check test, they go online in the paper. Some make it to the print edition as well. So if you are a resident of Blacks Harbour wishing to still express your concerns, it's a great way to get your own words out there exactly as you want them to be heard by the public.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, our final top stories of the year for 2025.
So we have an opportunity to really attach healthcare professionals to that clinic, make some of the investments we need to in it.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. We're heading back to St. Stephen with actually what turned out to be great news by the end of the year.
Yes. So I lost track of the amount of times I asked the Premier, when are you going to announce the St. Stephen Collaborative Care Clinic? And if people will recall, during the election campaign, they promised 10 clinics within the first 18 months of their mandate. That included one in St. Stephen. Now, you and I both know that several doctors here have either passed away or have closed their practices for retirement. So many patients are kind of what they describe as orphan patients. So patients that have nowhere to go. And so there was mounting pressure for this clinic to be opened. I will say it was one of the last clinics they opened, and when we did get the announcement, it wasn't the full story.
That's right. We went to the Charlotte County Hospital for the announcement of the St. Stephen Collaborative Care Clinic, which has been working out of the Charlotte County Hospital with Dr. Saber on the top floor. But only they were able to take 310 patients was the amount of patients they were able to have there, just because of size of the clinic itself. When we went to St. Stephen for the announcement, the lease hadn't been signed yet though, so we still had to do the announcement at the Charlotte County Hospital. But we are hoping, maybe even by the time this airs, that the location itself will be unveiled.
Yeah, I think, the important thing to remind the audience is that this clinic actually started operating in February. And so to have had almost 10 months and have only taken 310 people off the list is not an extraordinary accomplishment. We did speak to Dr. Y.L. Saber, as you mentioned, who is the physician that works at that clinic, and he spoke about the lack of space there and how stressful it is to work in that space because there isn't enough of it. They need a bigger space, and so that's why we're waiting on some sort of lease for a different property in St. Stephen. There's scuttlebutt around town about where it could be, but we officially don't know, and we won't know until that announcement is made. And it probably won't open in this calendar year. It will be in next year. The Premier expects in early to late January. So they still got a little ways to go. But when we talked to Dr. Saber, he said, people who are coming to our Access Clinic, which is a clinic for people who have non-urgent medical issues that they want to divert from the emergency room to this clinic, are begging him to be taken on by him as a physician. And this speaks to the sheer number of New Brunswickers without a primary care provider. 180,000 New Brunswickers are without a family doctor in this province. It is extraordinary. And we know that we have a wave of aging physicians that are sort of leaving the system. And we sort of haven't kept pace with new physicians coming into the system.
And I think that people will remember an event that happened in St. Stephen where people were asked to come if they didn't have a family doctor to get signed up, just to put themselves on a waiting list. And I think the outpouring of people that showed up for that shows you how real those numbers are in our area, because St. Stephen now, especially with it being bigger than it is, there's thousands in the surrounding areas as well that might not have a family doctor.
Yes, and the province is saying that 14,000 people have come off that list, but we have heard from other journalists who are asking the question, okay, well, if 14,000 people have come off the list and are now matched with a primary care provider, how many people are now on it? So what we really need to know from the government and the Department of Health is the net gain and the net loss. That's really the more accurate picture of how these collaborative care clinics are actually performing. And it's interesting because I think that there's going to be a few more that are going to be announced, but I think that Black's Harbor is planned in 2026. So we've got a few more coming. But certainly it's going to be very important over the next several months, and it's certainly something I will be watching, is how they measure the success of these collaborative care clinics and whether or not they provide the data that actually shows, that net gain and that net loss. Because as people are going, off the list, people are coming on. So we need to understand that to have a comprehensive understanding of how the healthcare system is improving. And I will say there are a number of things that New Brunswickers are going to expect to start to feel in terms of improvement based on the money this government has spent. Take a listen to the Premier speaking to reporters in St. Stephen about the progress of collaborative care clinics in Charlotte County.
And St. Andrews wasn't necessarily on the list yet. Dr. Julie Levesque-Taylor has taken it upon herself to introduce a similar model. How is that working out in the ecosystem of these collaborative care clinics?
Yeah, Dr. Levesque-Taylor has been a real role model for a number of doctors who have been interested in collaborative care, and thankfully she's been willing to share her experience, what she learned doing this elsewhere, and to come and build this kind of collaborative model in St. Andrews. So we've been working really closely with her, really excited to support what her team is doing and continue to invest to expand it so that she can serve more people.
What are your words to New Brunswickers, especially in the Charlotte County area today, when they see this opening of the clinic? How do you expect them to get involved, get themselves on the list?
Well, it's interesting because what we tell people to do is to make sure they're on HealthLink. There's been a lot of talk about the HealthLink numbers. If people aren't on HealthLink, then it's harder for us to attach them. So we actually have been driving people to sign up and make sure they are there on the wait list and that their information is current, that we have the right phone numbers and the right addresses, the right email addresses to reach them, because as we get this new clinic built and add the new healthcare professionals, we're going to be reaching out to those people on HealthLink to provide them with a new permanent home for their healthcare. So that's my first piece of advice, is make sure you're registered on HealthLink. If you think you are, double check. You never know. The old registry was moved across and things fell through the cracks when that was done a number of years back. So make sure you're on HealthLink, and then I want them to know that our government is committed, and we've put the money forward. We've changed our policies to make this work. We've partnered with the community to get the right location and support the team of people here that started delivering collaborative care when we kind of launched the model in February. And so we are committed to improving the healthcare access for people in this area.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to have our final thoughts on 2025.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon. So what a year. I'm sort of glad it's over.
In so many ways, I'm glad it's over. But when I actually look back on it, I think about the fact that, last year, 2024, we saved the St. Croix Courier, rebranded it the Courier, and had it online. 2025, what I'm most proud of? We brought the Courier back to print. Monthly, we've changed it, we've modernized it. Obviously, doing a weekly print paper doesn't make as much sense in 2025 when breaking news really belongs digitally to, if you print that a few days later, everyone's already seen it. But we take the top stories and put them in a print edition and made it a free publication. So for me, that was really a super groundbreaking year to do something from a corner of the world that is rural and somehow manage to keep local news alive. It's just sometimes when you look back on it, it doesn't seem real.
Yeah, when I started in August of 2024, hard to believe that it's been that long. It's flashed by me in a minute. We launched a new website that is, sort of more modern than the one we had before. We then, partnered with several members of the community to launch that print version, which would not have been possible without their support and without their keen sense of volunteerism. Because it wouldn't be possible every month without them.
And I'll give a special shout out to Guy Grew, who came to us and said, hey, I think I may have found funding to print the Courier again, and I will volunteer to do layout. And you're like, oh my gosh, okay. I said, we don't have anyone to do layout. Okay, I'll learn. And he did. Cindy Kohler, who's done a lot of the design work with the website too, does the ads for the print edition. It's just been amazing to have people from the community step up to volunteer their time to help out. That shows you how important local news though is and how seriously people take it, because we barely have copies left to even take home to our family when the print edition is done each month. There's thousands of copies printed and they're all spoken for by the end of the month.
What a fantastic problem to have. I mean, everywhere I go, I spend a lot of time with other journalists and other journalistic organizations. I'm a director with the Canadian Association of Journalists. And so I hear, print is dead. Print is gone. And we print 3,000 copies a run, and they're gone. Mm-hmm. And we've had people reach out to us and say, can you specifically mail me a copy? Because they're going to the store, mm-hmm. and they're not there for them. And so we're going to have a conversation in the new year about what that might look like. But certainly, this is something to be extremely proud of. The community has stepped up to support the Courier in a way that I think even us were not expecting. The people are reaching out to Mo Basque to advertise.
Oh, Mo Basque, sorry, I didn't even give Mo a shout out. Mo's our ad sales is just fantastic.
So, and he's doing a lot of work, right? Getting people, fitting people in, adding them to the list, right? And for the most part, there's some time, especially now in the winter where we have a couple spots that are empty because there is a lot of places that close specifically here in St. Andrews. But this is something to be incredibly proud of, and the community has been extremely supportive, which we are so happy about.
It takes a village, and we never would take the credit for doing this all ourselves, because we know that's not the reality. The reality is it takes the volunteers, it takes the community to want this. It's a nonprofit. This place is really owned by the entire community. Luckily, we are the type of people who are willing to fail greatly. So we'll try it, and if the community likes it, then we'll keep doing it. I don't mind failing if it proves to be not something that the community wants, but as it turns out, there was a big desire for it. So 2026, it might be that's the year we'll launch something where if you want it mailed to your house, maybe there's a support CHCO and the Courier type thing online, that it could be a Friends of CHCO thing that you could, because obviously we still have to survive. So
yeah, I mean, you're constantly sort of on the hamster wheel of how do you keep yourself funded, how do you keep things, not only accessible but free for people to read and experience. I know a lot of people get upset about paywalls, but really, at the end of the day, that goes towards operating and paying for journalists for the work that they do. I think this has been a big year for news in Charlotte County.
Yeah.
We have done a tremendous amount of accountability journalism. We spoke about it in our first segment. That accountability journalism resulted in the St. Andrews Council reevaluating the scope of that project. I think that has been a really big development this year, mm-hmm. is the sheer amount of news that you and I have been able to produce this year. I think I did a little year-end report, and I think we've done this year, conservative estimate, about 400 stories this year.
Well, I also want to give you a shout out to show that this has caught the attention across the province. Nathalie this year also became a political panelist for CBC Shift every Friday. It's around 5:30, 5:45 on Friday afternoons. She's one of the main political panelists now, and she's able to represent the perspective of Southwest New Brunswick on that panel, which I enjoy hearing you on. I actually heard the Premier say, nice work on Shift, Nathalie, when we were down in St. Stephen's. So I guess everybody's watching. And a personal shout out, I'm excited to be in the winter edition of the Maritime Edit magazine in a profile that James Mullinger himself did on me, and our Jeff Lively did the photos for. And that issue is that story. It's a 6-page story, and it's really about Charlotte County. You have to pick it up to read the whole thing, but it really is a story about Charlotte County, the reviving the Courier, the work at CHCO. So it's a love letter to all of you as well.
A lot of change. This is our final episode for 2025. We'll see you right back here at the news desk in 2026. Thanks for watching. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki.